Like many gardens across the state, our studio gardens too have been laid to waste from the recent record-breaking cold temperatures. And most of our vegetables and ornamentals are really been devastated, even our fall garden and even some of our fall annuals. But right here in one of our raised beds, we have the Austrian winter peas, which were one of our cover crops. And they really didn't get a lot of damage, and it's the only green thing around, and the deer have already started coming in, and they've got up in the bed and they're feeding on it, as well as some of the other crops too. Now about this same time last year, if you'll remember and you were watching the show, we got a cold snap and the deer absolutely came in and wiped us out. They were feeding on everything from the sweet potatoes where they topped them out. We didn't even have to cut them back to harvest them. They were feeding on the southern peas and ate the peas off, left the peduncles. They were also feeding on broccoli and cauliflower, and they really did some drastic damage on some of our apples and pears. And then right on through the winter into early spring, lastly, they were feeding on tulips. So the deer have a tendency to come in and start scavenging for food during the winter months. Now, as a result, we tried and talked about everything in controls from soap to human hair and even repellents, all to no avail. A little bit of control, but it was usually things that were very short-term and short-lived. Now, there's another alternative being discussed quite a bit through some of the research institutions about plants that are actually repellents or that deers do not like to feed on. Now, of course, there's always a few guidelines that you need to follow. First of all, you need to keep in mind that the deer population has a big role. We might come out here and see 1 or 2 or as many as 8 or 10, and obviously the more deer, the more destruction that they can do. So the population is really going to play a big role in what kind of problems you might have. Also, keep in mind that some deer have regionalized taste. They might give out recommendations at some institutions where deer in a particular part of Oklahoma or just in our region might have different appetites. They may have acquired a taste for a different plant that they normally wouldn't, just for sure survivability. And also the location in your garden. Areas that may be a little bit more protected or that they have more access to might be more susceptible or the greater targets for the particular plants. Here at our studio gardens, they are so familiar and comfortable with it, we've not really found a bed or an area that they haven't put a few of the footprints down in. Also, when you're going to choose plants that deer maybe don't like to feed on, make sure you choose plants that are going to be adapted to your growing conditions or to your area. Remember, we have a wide range of conditions in the state of Oklahoma from the south to the north and east to the west where different plants grow in different conditions. So make sure you select plants that are adapted to your growing site like you normally would for ornamentals or landscape plants. And of course, it's always fun to try a few new ones, and go ahead and do that, but only try 1 or 2 so you don't put a great investment in it until you find out if they're going to grow and if the deer are going to resist eating them. And one thing that is fun to do that's really great experience too is to visit with your neighbors and friends and other garden club members and garden centers to find out what experiences they've had. They might have some plants that they found that the deer have a tendency to bypass. So don't forget to check with your other gardening friends and neighbors as well. And then most importantly is don't always count on combinations or mixing up the plantings, because a lot of times they'll trample down your good plants that they're not hungry for to get to the ones that they do like to feed on. Well, let me give you a quick listing of some annuals that some of the research shows that deer really aren't too keen on as far as eating. Some of these you're very familiar with, and again, we'll just give you a listing. Ageratum, Dusty Miller, and Dusty Miller is one that grows throughout the winter time. French marigolds, salvia, zinnias, and wax begonias are a few that they're finding that the deer really won't feed on too much. Now, one annual that's in our garden is the pansy, and boy, they have found it withstood a little bit of the cold, and they've nibbled on it. They've actually pulled them out of the ground, so one of those few things left they've managed to find and feed on. Now, a few perennials to mention are foxglove, liatris, some of the sages, wormwood, and yarrow. And we've even seen tulips listed on some of the lists, but again, it happened to be one of the favorite for the deer in our particular region. So remember to expect the unexpected. Plants may chew on some of your plants they've never touched in years. And lastly, just recognize that the best deer-proof garden is really going to be one that combines sensible planning with some proper fencing and some of the different repellent. And also, don't forget, patience doesn't hurt any at all either.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.